Alright, on the first part of this section, we're trying to shade everything that's equal or equivalent to 1.019. So on this first one, we're going to try to change that into a decimal by dividing the fraction. This is a mixed number we have, so it's going to be 1 and then a decimal part. It's going to be 1 and then 0.019, exactly the decimal that we see here. Alright, so we're just going to divide this out in the calculator, and we'll see we get the decimal part of that. And the 1 really just attaches onto the front of it, which makes it equal to the decimal we see there. The next one can't be equal, honestly. You see that we have the exact same 1 in front. 19 divided by 100 can't be the same as the 19 divided by 1000 we had over here. So that's not going to be equal. That would be 0.19. There wouldn't be a 0 there. The next one works. We're going to divide that out. That's going to give us this exact decimal, including the 1. The next one is an addition problem with some scientific notation. It's a little bit tricky. It's kind of the same idea as the mixed number. We have a 1 plus some decimal part. This -2 tells us that we move the decimal place back 2 places to make it 0.019 as a decimal, which is, again, the decimal part of this. And 1 plus that would give us 1 and then that decimal part, 0.019. The next two I want to compare. We have a percent that looks exactly like what we're given. It's the exact same thing as what we're given in the problem. That's not equal. A percent and a decimal, when they look exactly the same, they can't be equal because the percent needs its decimal place moved 2 places to look like a decimal. Let's make sure that the one on the right is actually equal to it. We'd move the decimal place back 2 places. It would end up in between the 1 and the 0, which is exactly as we see it there. So we're going to shade that one also. In the next section, we're trying to convert each of the following numbers into the 2 other forms. So we have the 3 forms that we have to just go between. Getting to the fraction is probably the trickiest. Going between decimals and percents is pretty easy. We just move decimal places. Going to the fraction is probably the one we need the most help with. So going from a decimal to a fraction, we're trying to put that over some denominator. We're going to take that decimal, this decimal, and put it over some denominator. The denominator is always decided by the number of decimal places past the decimal point. We have 3 numbers past the decimal place. So we're going to put that number without the decimal point over a 1 and that many zeros. Again, that's 3 decimal places. So we make it a 1 with 3 zeros. You could also just read the decimal place. It's 3 thousandths. That's the thousandths place here. And that's exactly what we would read here, 3 thousandths. Going to the percent, we would move the decimal place 2 places. Let's clean that up so we can see it again. It would move 2 places to the right. The percent's always going to look bigger than the decimal. 2 places to the right, that's 0.3. That's where the decimal place is going to go. So it's going to be 0.3%. On the next one, we're given the fraction. This is probably the easiest example. We're going to divide that to find the decimal. Divide that in the calculator, you get the decimal, 0.125. Then exactly what we just did, we're going to move the decimal place 2 places backwards. It's going to go to the right, 1, 2. That makes it 12.5%. Alright, on this next one, it's really tough to jump directly from the percent to the fraction, so we'll go to the decimal first and then change it to a fraction. We're going to move the decimal place 2 places. This time we're going to move it forwards. We're going to move it 1, 2. We're going to move it to the left twice. Put the decimal in front of the 1. And now changing it to a fraction, similar to the first example, except this time we actually have numbers in the first 2 decimal places. We have to include this entire number, and again, we're going to write it without the decimal place, but we're going to write it over this many zeros, a 1 with that many zeros. You could also think of this as 111 thousandths. It was 111 over 1,000. You can always check your fractions just by dividing them back out. If you divided 111 by 1,000, you'd get that exact decimal. In this next section, we're going to place an X in all the boxes next to true statements. So in this first one, 1.1 divided by 100 equals 0.011. We just want to see if that's true. Basically, are those two things equal? Easiest way to tell this is just divide that decimal, the 1.1, by 100, and you'd see in the calculator that you'd get exactly that decimal. Those are the exact same thing. So we're going to put an X in that box. All right, the next one, we see some scientific notation. We see a positive exponent. We see a positive exponent here. That means the decimal point is going to move to the right 3 spots. It's going to put 2 zeros there. It's going to be 6,700. Way too big for that. If it was a negative exponent, then it would be equal to that decimal. But since it's positive, it goes to the right and it becomes a bigger number. In the top right, we have a decimal 0.1 and a percent being compared. So we're going to have to move the decimal place on either one, I guess. I would move the decimal point on the decimal and move it 2 back to the right. That's 10%. That's the exact same thing. So we want to put an X on that one. And on the last one, we have a percent compared to a scientific notation. So I would change those both into decimals. So the first one is 0.64. We move the decimal place back 2 places. And this one's asking us to move the decimal place back 1 place. Scientific notation tells us how many places the decimal point moves. That's 1 place back. That's also 0.64. So that one's going to get an X also.